Welcome to episode 3 of the Tapping Into podcast. This podcast is sponsored by Alverum, an award-winning cult beauty and well-being brand steeped in ritual, powered by nature, focused on self-care and finessed by science. Alverum's Pure Radiance facial oil are like drops of gold for your skin. It includes natural retinol and a CBD alternative, patchouli extract, that calms the expression lines in the face. I've been really loving putting this on at night and taking a few moments to massage the oil into my skin. And I've also started putting pressure on the tapping points as I go for some extra stress release. If you too would like to feel relaxed, restored and renewed, thanks to Alverum, Tapping Into podcast listeners can receive an exclusive 20% discount using the code TAPPINGFORMOMS. This week we go on a journey to Atlantis with Priscilla Campos. Priscilla is a dance teacher turned energy healer who has been on a long journey of spiritual awakening and remembrance that has taken her from her home in Canada to Turkey and Egypt and inward to her own memories of her time in Atlantis. In this episode we talk about what Atlantis is, how long it existed, what is Golden Atlantis, the impact that it's had on the rest of the world and other cultures. We discuss the fall of Atlantis and the wounds that we still carry from that time in our soul memories. It is a fascinating chat and one that I could have continued for another few hours. If you have any interest in ancient civilizations, then this is the episode for you. I really hope you connect with Priscilla's beautiful energy and enthusiasm for this ancient past and pay attention to how you react to this conversation. Does anything resonate within you? Do you feel this is truth? Do any memories come to you as a result? You can follow Priscilla's journey at Instagram, Temples of Atlantis and the Atlantean Priestess. Her website, templesofatlantis.ca, has details of all her different healing packages, like the Golden Atlantean Healing, which I've had and was truly amazing, and also her Akashic Record Healing, which I have booked. Have a look in the show notes for Priscilla's suggested reading list for Atlantis and Lemuria so you can continue on your journey of discovery, and I hope you enjoy this episode. So welcome to the Tapping Into podcast, Priscilla. Thank you so much for being here tonight.
Blessings. Thank you very much for having me. Always a pleasure to talk about Atlantis.
It is your topic of choice for sure, which I'm very, very excited to dive into with you. First off, tell me a little bit about yourself. Where are you based in the world?
Blessings, everybody. Thank you. I'm in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, which is close-ish to the West Coast. I'm about a 14-hour drive from the ocean to the nearest ocean. As we know, Canada is quite large, and I'm considered a prairie in the prairies, but we do have some incredible mountains, which is a 5-hour drive for me, which has the Archangel Michael vortex of the world in it. So whenever you need heart expansion, we head to the mountains and just get to be there and ground, which is what I just did this weekend. So I feel very good right now.
Amazing. Gosh, a little nip to the beach, 14 hours. I mean, I can't even comprehend that.
And that's the closest access. The Atlantic Ocean would be about a 3-day trip, maybe of 72 hours of driving. Canada, like I said, it's very large. It takes 12 hours by flight just to get from one side to the other.
Wow, that's incredible. I'm just pausing to change something. My wife. Okay, I'm back. Sorry, I just had to change that.
Oh, good.
Right. So how does a beautiful Canadian lady all of a sudden become almost obsessed? Would that be the right word? Very interested in a kind of a mystical or a unproven period of our existence.
Right. I feel like our soul always tells us who we are. And the further we get upon our spiritual path, the more we understand. So as a young child, I really did believe I was from Egypt and Greece. And I love those countries like nothing else. They feel like my home. I've been to Greece a couple times, and every time I'm there, it feels so familiar. So my soul has led me clues all along. And the fact, the more that I know now, the more I recognize that every spot I love on the planet is actually very connected to Atlantis. So when we're talking about any kind of temples, pyramids, ancient structures, that's what my soul wants to visit. And so just, journeying through my path is eventually, my guides just tell me that it's time to look into Atlantis. And when I initially scoff at it, because it seems like, oh, who cares? It's just a sunken city that's not even real. I immediately started studying it because I do trust my guides. And that was the beginning of 2017. And once you start, if you're an Atlantean, once you start, it feels like such a homecoming that you can't ignore it. And previous to my spiritual work, I loved dance. And I would say I was very obsessed with dance and thought I was going to be a dance teacher, well into my 80s. But once I started shifting into light work and healing and really honoring my senses, there was no denying that I would be pursuing a path related to Atlantis. And my very, very first class I ever took to do with Atlantean healing, within an hour, I knew that's exactly why I was on the planet. And that's what I would truly be doing for the rest of my life, which is such a gift.
Wow. And you mentioned casually, your connection with your guides, and they told you to research Atlantis. That's not, not everyone has that very open channel connection to their guides. Some people may not even be aware that they have them. So how long were you in kind of open dialogue with your spirit team?
I feel like when I was in grade 6, which I would have been 11, I started really looking into Greece, and I loved goddess Athena since that time. And I did a book report on her in grade 10. And so I feel like she's been guiding me very distantly from afar, but in subtle ways, to get me to Greece, to get me to Italy, to get me to all these places in the world where I would see her. And in the beginning of my spiritual awakening around 2013, it's one of the first things I did was learn how to listen to angels and to trust my Holy Spirit, to trust my intuition. And I didn't go just from like A to Z, in a short period of time. It really took me, I'd say, at least 2 years of tuning in and being very religious in my studying. Like every morning I would write a message, and I would open myself up to spirit and see who wanted to guide me that day. And I find one of my gifts is just knowing who I'm speaking with. It's, archangels, goddesses, ascended masters, more like star nation beings. I just have an understanding of who it is. It doesn't mean that their voices are always different, but it comes back to myself, and I trust my Holy Spirit, and I trust the guidance. So I seen Athena in Bath, England, actually in 2016. There's a statue head of her as Minerva, the Roman counterpart goddess. And when I saw her, and I always travel with my journal, I looked at her and I said, "Do you have a message for me?" And she said, yes. And literally she said, "You're going to go back to Greece quicker than you think. And when you do, you're going to have to start reading about Atlantis to prepare." And that trip was my first and only trip so far in the UK. And it really was the catalyst for the energies I bring forth now, which to me just shows again how strong all these connections are weaved through our world.
Wow, I have full body shivers as you tell me that story, actually, which for me is my signal of truth. When I hear someone speak truth in a profound way, I feel that in my body. So yeah, that feels amazing. Okay, so you got this message to investigate Atlantis, and where did that take you?
I'm a reader, and I wasn't a reader growing up because I didn't love the books that were assigned to me. But since I've been since on my spiritual path, I devour books, especially books on Atlantis. So I went to my local metaphysical store. I purchased 4 books on Atlantis. I would have read them between January and June of 2017. One of them I said was quite boring. The other 3 just fascinated me. And in particular, I always talk about this book for whoever may be able to see it. It's called Lemuria and Atlantis by Shirley Andrews. I had never heard of Lemuria. Okay. I bought the book because of Atlantis, but it was truly extraordinary for me at that time to read accounts of other people's memories of both of these places. And she has a wonderful way of just bringing it all together. And that is the foundation, I'd say, of what really supported me in my Atlantean path. And then after reading the books and traveling to Greece, then I started looking more into courses that I could take with others. But I always say, like, the greatest experience happens for me through meditation and through my own Akashic records, and then reading for others or sharing Golden Atlantean healings. It gives me a broader scope of what Atlantis truly was. And it shows me more experiences beyond my own.
Amazing. So you kind of really pull together information from other people's experiences. And I'm sure there's a lot of historical information as well, isn't there? Because Graham Hancock really explores this in his Ancient Apocalypse series in Netflix. I don't know if anyone has listened to it, but I devoured that myself. And I've always been attracted to the ancients, like what comes before what we know. And this is one of these things, and it's absolutely fascinated me as well. Hence why we're going to talk about this today. So for those who, I mean, most people will have heard of Atlantis, the high level name. They may not know anything beyond that. Some people will have their own, perceptions or connections with it. In your kind of now combined knowledge and understanding from your own experience and from others, what is Atlantis?
Atlantis is an incredible frequency that every realm goes through within our existence. So whenever a realm is accelerating from a third to a fourth to a fifth density, you're going to come into what is known as the Atlantean era. So on Earth, the Atlantean era goes back about 12,000 years ago to 3.5 million years ago. So the weird thing is when people say, well, Atlantis isn't real, which I used to think, it's literally in every single historical account you will ever see. However, the names for Atlantis, I found at least 30 to 40 different names for it. And a big part of it is that our current society is sold the illusion that really, modern civilization only goes back so far. And so they can't really break that mold by saying, well, actually, Atlantis is 3.5 million years ago. Lemuria is 4.5 million years ago, and what comes before that. But Golden Atlantis by itself is the epitome thus far, and of what I know, of where human beings have achieved in their consciousness on the planet. It is a place of absolute unity and love and community and support. It's a matriarchal society, which means that everybody is cared for, everybody is nurtured, everybody is heard. And it's that utopia that most of us are wishing for and dreaming of. We have achieved it before, and we will achieve it again. But Atlantis is also the great lesson, the lesson of what happens when we allow materialism, greed, or darkness to sway us, and what happens when we stop trusting our Holy Spirit, which for me is, our direct guidance to source, to creator. So it's extremely powerful. When it's in its golden era, it travels and spreads throughout the world. And this is why we have, pyramids in Mexico and in Asia and everywhere we can think of. But it's also about teaching writing, wisdoms, mathematics, sciences, universal knowledge, sacred geometry, and alchemy. And it's about sharing that knowledge to, again, really raise the consciousness of the planet. As Atlantis begins to fall, and it's a very long period for me, I don't think it's anything like 100 years or 200 years. It's the downfall of our consciousness. We start to see more of what we know in history, like think about Greece or Rome when they're in that expansion mode and they start getting very aggressive and it's about territory. The Atlanteans do become that, unfortunately. But in the golden era, it's the most powerful healing. It's the most beautiful light. And it's one of the greatest parts of joy on our planet.
So do you believe that that we are transitioning now back to a frequency of this golden Atlantic period? So the Earth's energy itself has moved into fifth dimensional energy, and so we've kind of, did we come into Atlantis as 5D? So we didn't do like the 3D to 5D piece. We just came in ready to go in this beautiful state of union and harmony and bliss. And then things changed the fall, as we can come back to in a minute. And then we've kind of been climbing our way back up since. Is that kind of how you see it?
I feel like Atlantis is like a sister to Lemuria. Lemuria is the motherland. And at that time, I don't think the Lemurians ever came into a third density. I think they were really fourth and fifth. And when Atlantis is created, it's like, okay, so we can have this deep connection to Gaia, but now can we become more in a physical form and involve source so that we stay in balance? So I feel like the Atlanteans probably were in a fourth dimensional frequency as it was, came into a fifth, and eventually came down into a third. And I do think where we are now is, if for those that are familiar with the precession of the equinoxes, and it talks about Earth goes through a cycle every 26,500 years. Atlantis is said to have sunk about 12,000 years ago. And as what we would know is that would be the very bottom of something, right? If you're going to actually sink a continent because our morals are so corrupted, that sounds very low and very dark. And so we've been climbing out of that for a very long time. And so it is my belief that right now in this era, a lot of us are already in a fourth density and in a frequency back into unity and love. And so we're actually building new Atlantis as we speak. It has never left. The practices that sunk it have never left, but the practices that endured with the love and the wisdom have also never left. And that's why we have the Vedas of India, and we have like the Popol Vuh of or maybe it's the Popol Vuh, sorry, of the Aztecs. Like it's written in sacred texts in Tibet and Nepal and everywhere we can think of. And as we raise our consciousness again, we're going to have more access to it, and we're going to feel more free and liberated.
It's amazing. So the energy's never left.
Never.
It's just our experience of it was different to how it was at that time. Okay, so let's paint a picture of golden Atlantis. You know, the crystal frequency was used a lot, water was used, ritual, flowers and sound, and everyone understood energy and frequency. And let's paint a picture for daily life from what you've connected with.
The picture is that you're living in cities that are harmonized with nature, that you don't take from Gaia, you build with Gaia. The cities are concentric, and that's why people will get confused that, oh, is Atlantis here in the Sahara Desert? Is it here in Antarctica? Is it here? You're going to have cities all around the world that reflect that kind of central island, ring of water, another ring of land, ring of water. And one of the reasons is because at that time, the dolphins are our greatest teachers. So every morning in my mind, I'll give you a rundown of Queen Atlanta. Okay, so I live in a beautiful palace. I'm overlooking the Atlantic Ocean. To my right from my balcony is Mount Atlas. Atlas is the highest mountain ever reached on the earth. And it's actually said that the letter A represents Mount Atlas because it's such a tall peak, and the bar across the A represents the clouds. Wow. So Atlas is like the original Mount Olympus. And so when you're an Atlantean, you have this grounding energy of Mount Atlas right on your island, but it's never just about staying put. It's about how much can you achieve. Now, let's say I come down from the palace and I walk through the beautiful roads or the streets. Kings and queens aren't looking to be worshipped they're really a part of the people. And so, you know, I would immediately hear music. The music would probably be the sounds of a chorus of angels. Because our third eyes are open, and you're very much, for those of you that can see visually, I wear crystals on my forehead. I really believe that's the Atlantean practice. We would be able to see each other's misalignments. So if I knew, perhaps for you, Sarah, like, hey, you know, like your solar plexus is really blocked today. Oh, it is. I better get to the healing temple. Like, it was such a beautiful integration, and every temple is a devotion of studies. We have the temple of knowledge, the temple of truth, the temple of beauty, the temples of healing, the temple of Poseidon. And I really feel like we don't go to school in the same way we do now. We educate through apprenticing. So when a child is born, the high priest or priestess would read their Akashic records and have a feeling for who they are, where their soul has been before, and they would immediately start supporting the child with what they were meant to do. So let's just say if somebody was meant to work with animals, well, then that family is probably going to have some type of land where they can have, you know, horses and donkeys and unicorns and Pegasuses and all these wonderful, amazing things. But it's like, I guess, made me think about it as your best day you've ever had on vacation, where it's like the perfect weather, the sun is shining, you're eating the most freshest, beautiful food, and everything just seems to flow. That to me would be a typical Atlantean day. And we are going to, you know, meditate. We're going to celebrate. We're going to go to the temples, and we are going to do rituals in gratitude to God, to Gaia. But everything is about community. And I just last week celebrated the Atlantean Festival of Earth, which is in alignment with spring. And my view of the Atlanteans is that they would celebrate something for like 2 weeks at a time. And it's not about, I'm not talking about like drinking and getting rowdy. I mean, like dancing in the streets and, you know, singing for everyone to hear, and doing mantra and like all these wonderful things, and sound healers, and so much beauty. And then the other key component would be the crystals that you mentioned. To me, every single temple, every single house would have a very large crystal that would keep the frequency lifted. And the crystals, as we know, of course, can like purify and cleanse and heal, but they're also incredible wisdom keepers. They are like our friends. We're not seeing them as something that's mute or dead. We're understanding that they are a part of our path in the same way that the dolphins are. The dolphins from Sirius, the whales from Sirius, they are our teachers. And one of the beautiful things about Atlantis is it wasn't closed off to a greater galactic community. It was in full awareness that, you know, we came from somewhere else besides Earth, and we're now on this realm. How are we going to create heaven on earth?
It absolutely sounds just like that, doesn't it? And the Emerald tablets talk about as above, so below, as kind of, you know, I've heard, you know, people thinking that Atlantis was like an experiment, like, you know, can high dimensional frequency beings live on Earth in a lower density, in a human body, and maintain that connection? I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yes, and we did. We did. Well, we didn't, right? So it was possible.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I've read that too many times about it being an experiment. I'm not opposed to it.
Yeah.
It's just that now that I've done so much work with it, I really feel like it has to do with the frequency, you know? So like I said, for every other types of beings I've worked with, when they come into this fifth dimension, which is really about unity, right? Then you can see, like, I'll see Queen Atlanta weave her way in there and support the people and bring them up into a very safe and wonderful space. So the Atlanteans were very pure for a very, very, very long time. And I'd say a lot of books only talk about Golden Atlantis lasting about 1,500 years. But I no longer believe that. It doesn't resonate with me. I really think it lasted for an incredibly long time. And this is why Earth at that time was such a jewel of our universe. And it's something that we should take pride in because we know we can come back there. But eventually, the Atlanteans are corrupted. And when we learn about that, we understand that it's just a part of what was to be written. And one of the things that I do as a teacher of Atlantis is really heal people's shame regarding their role in the destruction. Because we've all, as a soul, we want to have all the experiences. We don't actually want to come into incarnation with being the queen, and having just the easiest life, because how is your soul going to grow? It has to have the challenge of what happens when I face darkness, what happens when my insecurities come up. And to me, the Atlanteans didn't fail. They actually did their mission wonderfully, but we have so much trauma from it that a lot of us are stuck now.
Yeah, I remember I dabbled with the Kabbalah school in London a couple of, 15 years ago or so. And one of the things that that sticks with me is that, if we had very wealthy parents and they just gave me loads of money, that I wouldn't feel really any joy from that money because I haven't earned it myself and I have no value in it and I don't connect with it. And the same way, with just being given 5D and living in a blissful, joyful world, there's not necessarily sustained gratitude for it, because it's just, that's what I have. There is nothing, there's no contrast, there's no duality, there's nothing to compare it against. Is that how?
Oh, yes.
That's kind of where that went, wasn't it? The duality came in.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of everybody's existence. And when you read more about multidimensional beings, you find out some of them are at a 12th dimension frequency or a 22nd or a 23rd. And this is just the path that Earth is supposed to take through her evolution. And for all of us on the planet now, my personal belief is that everybody has had at least one lifetime on Atlantis, and everyone is here now to really usher in this frequency, because we're not new, we're ancient souls, and we've done this not only on Earth but on other planes as well. And it's just like, you have to come through the duality, because it is that if your soul is just born, and I do believe you ask to be born, to come into consciousness, and all you experience is love, then how do you know it's love? If that's all that there is. And sometimes when you look at different theories and different people's writings, they talk about Sophia as a source energy, and just wondering, well, what else is out there? She's like, that's only consciousness in the whole universe, but there's nothing else. So she's like, well, I'm going to have to create more of me, more beings. And then even through my own lifetimes, when I've analyzed them, I've been really poor many, many times, and I've been without love a few times. And now I'm at a stage where I'm so supported by the universe that I'm so much more grateful for it. And I did come through, a very challenging lifetime, as many of us have. But even this weekend, just being in the mountains, it feels so amazing. When I have to do a 5-hour drive to get to the mountains, and then, like I said, the 14-hour drive to get to the ocean, my God, do you appreciate it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I have it, not to make you jealous or anything, but like I have it 30 seconds from my front door. But there's days I don't go and see it.
Right.
Because I'm living there, I'm taking it for granted. I'm not appreciating it. You mentioned earlier about the Vedas and the texts, and we've got the Emerald Tablet and this residue of the teachings and the knowledge that I suppose is held within people in their kind of soul DNA, that is allowing us to bring these healings back into reality. And you said we are here now for this purpose, really, to shift the frequency. We can see this in the way all these amazing modalities are just popping up left, right, and center. Not everyone. There's a lot of people like just dropping the corporate job and going off and becoming Pilates instructors or Reiki healers or meditators or tappers like me, which was definitely my path. So it really does feel like in history and evolution, like this is a wave. This is not an imagination. This is something that is absolutely happening.
Yeah, and I think this is the purpose of what happened in the last 3 years as well.
Mm.
When we look at the bigger scope, the amount of people that have awoken since 2020 and have just started questioning not just like the big establishments, but like what are they doing in their own lives? And I find with a lot of my clients, and I also had the same feeling in 2013, you get to a point where you're like, there's got to be more than this. There's got to be more to life than getting in the car, going to work, you know, dropping your kids off somewhere, making a meal, going to bed, you know, like there's something more. And I really considered it a gift. And I know it's going to continue to happen this year and next year and the year after. But this, what people term as the Great Awakening, I think is such an empowerment move back to self and to recognizing that nobody can actually tell you what to do, what to take. You have to take the initiative. Is that if you feel spirit pull on you and you're getting that urge to move to out of the corporate world, what has your soul loved all along? Now, I said my soul loved Egypt and Greece. And that's really the foundation of my work is past life work, even though I was told for a very long time, that's impossible, that doesn't exist. And I think for a lot of other people, once you recognize that you're an incredible healer or that you love music or you love art and you find ways that it heals you, then you become a teacher and you want to heal others. So I feel like it's going to be a mass exodus from most of the corporations throughout the rest of this decade. It's still going to take a lot of integrity, strength, and courage from the people. But as more awaken to their true power, it's such a gift to realize you're not alone, right? You have people that, you know, I'm glad I woke up, I said about 7 hours before, or 7 years before everything started. But there's people that have been doing the work for 40 years and 60 years and 80 years. And those are our teachers. And think about how lonely it was for them at that time to have such a small
paving the way.
Yeah.
And
now,
sounding ridiculous, you know, they got the woo-woo paintbrush, you know, like they really did have to take one for the team.
Yeah. And I bow to them, like, thank you so much. Because, you know, a lot of the texts that I read, especially about Atlantis, this stuff is written in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And at first it was very embraced. And then with the propaganda, it got to be very ridiculed. And you had mentioned Graham Hancock, and he talks about as well, like the ridicule he faces because people have this very set perception of where civilization was started. They don't want to hear that the pyramids are actually tens of thousands of years older than what they say, and the same thing for the Sphinx and many other things. So it's just like, I feel like when we're going through spiritual awakenings, the best thing you can do is question everything. And everything that you've been taught, you will eventually unravel it to reveal a greater truth. And that's one of the tricks in our world. Not everything is wrong. It's just that it's weaved with tidbits of truth. And then you have to find that one thread that leads to it and do the work. Nobody's going to hold your hand through your whole awakening until you go from A to B to C. You have to listen to your soul. And, you know, my soul's nudging was Atlantis. And like I said, I at first I dismissed it. And once I came back to self, I'm like, okay, just honor it, at least read a book and see what you think. And that's all it took. One book to lead me to the next, to the next, to the next. And eventually, pow, now I'm all Atlantis.
Tell me, well, it's a couple of things. So while you were talking there, I was thinking about the mythology, you know, the dragons, the Pegasus, the Phoenix, the angels, even, right? Angels appear in all these things, appear in mythical texts through time. Like, they didn't just come out of nowhere, like, and multiple similar objects and similar symbols and similar um energies and beings in multiple different places around the world at the same time, when there was no travel. Like, there is no question, in a way, that actually these things must have existed somewhere, in some place, somehow, for us to know about them, be talking about them today.
Absolutely. It's one of my favorite things, actually, is that whatever's been relegated to myth, you just have to remember it's been an extreme amount of time. And so it gets watered down and watered down. And then we have to think about the controllers that want to shape it. But as I mentioned, like our current civilization, we're living in a Lemurian and Atlantean aftershock, after waves, right?
Mhm.
What comes before 5 million years ago, I don't know, but I'm guessing that there was spectacular beings and animals at that time too. And that wave right now is currently lost to us. But in our current era, when we are talking about dragons, and you can see them depicted with cultures all over the world, and I would say that we did have really great access to travel, but not everybody did, right? Not everybody would have wanted to. So these things to me are very real. And one of the things I discovered by myself about Atlantis, which then was backed up with my studies in the last 2 years, was that all mythologies around the world that were talking about gods and goddesses, they actually all connect to Atlantis. So it doesn't matter if you're talking about Norse or Celtic or Hindu, or Aztec or Mayan, that all goes back to Atlantis. They actually all have the exact same story. It was that the gods came from an island, a paradise in the Atlantic Ocean that sunk, and they eventually spread out. But it's really fascinating, because I truly believe that the reality of that is that they were high priests and priestesses of Atlantis who led such extraordinary lives that their stories became legend. And eventually those legends relegated them to this higher level. It doesn't mean that they are a higher level, but I'm saying, like, the Atlanteans, like how the Catholics do now, they will end up putting someone into sainthood, right? So someone led an extraordinary life, they'll do that. The Atlanteans would did that. If somebody was so powerful like Osiris, they're not going to let that story die. So Osiris is a king of Atlantis. They're going to elevate him. And yes, it's going to get embellished somewhat, but the truth of it is there. And so when you look at that, then we come to understand that this is really actually our history. And they're showing us the drama of living on Earth. Zeus with all his incredible women that he's been with. How much of that is true, I don't know. But it's really interesting in what it creates, how it creates the fabric of our world. And it's just a shame that most people don't understand the truth and all that. And they're like, oh, that's just myth. Where does myth come from?
Exactly.
It comes from the truth, right?
Yeah.
Like,
and what are we being, hidden, like,
oh
we
yes.
had, oh yeah, we had all these amazing gods and goddesses that support us, these elemental beings, dragons, unicorns, and all these different frequencies of energy, color, crystals, and it's all been wrapped up into one god and a patriarchy, for example, that is, tears down women and so on. So yeah, I mean, the truth, and tuning into that, right? So I think that's what COVID era gave me as well, was a further questioning of what I've been told or what I've been led to believe is truth, and just going in and thinking, for me, I often don't need proof. I just need to feel it in my body. And for some people, that's very annoying, because they're like, yeah, but where's your proof? Where's the science? But for me, I'm like, no, that sounds right. That feels right for me. So I'd ask anybody listening as well to, as we're having this conversation, just tune into your own body. Does this resonate with you on some level? Is there some kind of remembrance that you can connect to, or does this sound like complete fantasy? And if so, awesome. Like, I love a bit of escapism with some fantasy as well. So come on the escapism journey with us.
I like to add to that in that, like, yeah, the COVID era, number one, gave us a chance to go within, right? Even though they were projecting a lot of things in all the news, that was the noise. For those of us
Mhm.
that took that time to tune in and think, well, what do I really want to do? How do I want to spend my time? It was like this breath, because in that first, for us in Canada, it was like March of 2020 to May, I think, was those first like shutdowns, and literally nothing was open and you weren't supposed to go anywhere minus to nature. So it kind of let everything that was the distractions fall away from your life to come into a real pure part. Again, I'm very grateful for that. I want to touch on unicorns for a second and say that I did not grow up believing in unicorns. I really was kind of cynical about them. And even in my spiritual work, when I first had a unicorn guide, I denied her many times. I was like, no, that's impossible. I'm clearly making this up. There's no way that this is real. And I'll laugh at myself, because up until she had a horn when she was a Pegasus, I thought it was the best spirit guide ever. I was all into it. I was like, yes, I got a Pegasus, just like from Greece. And then when I saw her horn, no, too bad, I'm making it up. But what changed my mind was I was doing a crystal healing with a client, and she was a pre-professional dancer. So she was just getting to that stage where she was about to do a whole bunch of auditions, and she had broke her ankle. And so my job was to see how fast could I help her heal so that she can get back into that audition process and go on with her path. And in my office, which I'm in now, literally a unicorn popped out of my closet. Okay, so that means, is it in the physical 3D world? No, but it
Yeah.
is in the fifth dimension, right? And so in my mind's eye, I was like, what is happening? I'm like, how is this happening? I'm like, and I said, it was very odd for me. I'm like, you can't even fit in here. What are you doing? Like, my room is quite small. And I just had the intuitive knowingness for me to be quiet. And it's just like, shh. And then it took its horns and it tapped both of my client's ankles, and this beautiful golden light rippled through. And then it kind of looked at me and nodded and went back into the closet. I said, what is going on? And so, you have a debrief usually when you do energy healings. And so I'm talking to my client, and she was like, we were talking, and she kind of says, this might sound weird, but she's like, do you believe in unicorns? And I'm like, oh, I do now. And she's like, right? She's like, did one come in here? I said, yes. And it was incredible, because after that, because my mind was open and my heart was opened, then they kept showing up in my healings. This is before I was doing my Atlantean work. But once I started doing the Atlantean work, then I understood, oh, Priscilla, you fool. Of course, Atlanteans Atlanteans, crystals, dolphins, and unicorns are like the pillars of Atlantis. Those are your healers, your teachers. And so, of course, as I get more into Atlantis, I'm going to understand the connection. But, I can laugh at myself for my previous 30 years of all the things I didn't believe in, and perhaps even made fun of some people for in my head, and here I am doing the same thing, being a teacher of, oh yeah, so you work with unicorns and dragons? Yeah, literally, yes, I do.
I love it. Tell me the story of Queen of Atlanta.
Mm. Queen Atlanta, I saw her I met her the first time in April or May of 2020 when I was studying alchemical healing, which is Egyptian healing. And when I saw her, I was receiving a healing from a classmate as part of our practice. I did understand that she was me, but it felt so distant and far away. And to me at that time, she looked a lot like me, but she had this light bluish skin. I don't mean like a very, very deep, but there was something very blue about her skin. Maybe it was her aura, and her head seemed elongated. And I knew that her name was Queen Atlanta. And I was like, this is so weird. And we had a little bit of a conversation where she told me that, my job was to continue to heal people and not to listen to everyone else, that I don't really get burned out. I do need to have a day rest every week. but I can continue to take clients at the rate I was, and it would be fine. And I said, okay. I met her again a few months later. It seemed very similar. Now she's kind of being one of my guides, but I feel like I'm not her, but I have been her. So it just feels separated. And then on Lionsgate of 2020, I'm at a secret retreat because we weren't allowed to gather at that time.
Nice.
Yeah, there's 50 of us women in the woods.
Oh, wow.
And I'm doing some really incredible activations that have never come through me before. And I'm feeling like very charged. And my own Reiki master teacher is there. And she says, Priscilla, you need to go ground. You've been doing a lot of work for everybody, like the last 2 or 3 hours. She's like, you need to ground. And I was like, I don't want to. Like, I feel so good, you know? She's like, no, go get your feet on the ground. And I have respect for her. So I was like, okay. So I go down, and what was crazy was the moment that my bare feet touched the earth, because I was on a deck, I should say, or a patio. Okay.
Right.
Once they touched the earth, it was like, to me, it's one of the most magical moments in my life. Everything that I saw, which was a lot of the trees and the grass and the lake, were golden codes. And this has never happened to me in this way again. So it really was a certain point in time. But like I could see the trees were like these moving codes, and each leaf danced with their own golden aura. And then the sun, even though it is golden, it became more golden. I could see these like codes leaving from the sun coming down. And I said, oh my God, I am Queen Atlanta. And I'm like, oh. And then I walked up the stairs to go back onto the deck. And on the left was an Ankh. Now the Ankh was my Reiki master teacher's. It wasn't mine. And I just picked it up and I said, this is mine. And then I started pointing to people and being like, you don't know who you are. Come here for an activation. I have to help you. And so I realized that the 50 women I was with were all queens. Okay. They were queens from another era, from another timeline, from another dimension, from another plane of existence. I just recognized, like, I could see them in their full regalia. Okay. I could see people with these like crazy headpieces and braids and these beautiful, beautiful robes and dresses. And I thought, oh my God, none of us know who we are, but now I do. And so I just started doing these activations, and I'll be honest, with the people that received them, the ones that I stayed in contact with or saw at another event, their life changed. Their life changed. It was like whatever things were keeping them back before, it was like they couldn't be with that illusion anymore. Like they just broke away. And one woman, I saw her 3 weeks later, and I said, I'm curious, because by this time I'm gaining, like I'm starting to understand what's happening. And so I said, did something change for you when I shared that activation? She's like, yes, I asked for a divorce the day I got home from the retreat. Like, oh my God. It's like, I just separated from my husband. I kicked him out. I'm like, oh my God, that wasn't what I was thinking, but
that's certainly activating.
Yes. So from that moment on, I stopped denying her, and I started listening to her. And I grew in my light and my love, because I will say one of the things about Queen Atlanta, when you do a meditation with me, and she keeps coming in more and more, is that the thing I love about her the most, besides her crazy headpieces that she loves, is that she's so compassionate. And I'm trying to learn, how can I hold space the way that she does, because she truly loves everybody. And on a spiritual level, I do, but on a human level, I'm still human. I still have agitations and frustrations. And even this weekend, I'm like, how can I be kinder? How can I be more like Queen Atlanta and embody her? And it's such a gift to remember. And it's one of my gifts, is I help people remember who they've always been. And once you realize that, then it's so much easier. If I know that I'm a Queen of Atlantis in so many lifetimes, everywhere I go throughout the galaxy, I'm still Queen Atlanta, then I don't have to shun her anymore. And then I can fully embrace myself without that struggle. Right. And before this podcast, I looked in the mirror, I said, okay, Queen Atlanta, what do you want to wear today? And she's like, this is how she instructed me. And I I don't deny it. It's too much for
Oh,
some, but for everybody else, it's like permission for them to be their authentic selves.
absolutely. And that is like, that's just the truth bomb there, isn't it? It's like, drop the mic, permission to be yourself. That is the goal. And that is the goal of every type of healing, isn't it? To shed the layers of the conditioning, to help you remember who you are, what you're here for, what you want from life.
Yes.
That's amazing. That's an amazing story.
Thank
I
you.
love how it's so current with you, like, because there's theories that we have parts of our soul, so that like I might be 25 to 30% of my soul in this current human avatar, for example. In another dimension, I might have another part of my soul. And what I can see you doing here is like almost merging these
Right.
parts into this human existence.
I love that you said that, because I've never heard someone else explain it like that, but that's exactly what I've come upon, is that I'm teaching a journey through Chem program right now, which means it's the Atlantean era to the early Egyptian era, the Atlantean Egypt. And this is exactly what I said. I'm going to help connect you to your multidimensional self. And I get that that seems like a little bit of woo-woo talk in itself, but when you understand, once again, that you are like, so far I haven't met a soul that's less than 100 million years old, according to how I read their Akashic records. Most souls that I read for, I'd say, are anywhere between 2 to 15 billion years.
Wow.
And when you understand that you've had these lifetimes, and Earth's lifetimes are very, very short. And this, right, living 60, 80, 100 years, that's, even in these bodies that we have, it's possible now for us to live in a very healthy way to 300 to 400 years, even to 800 years, without even really having to do too much. But for those of us that know, we're poisoned, right? We're poisoned so that we can't do that. But now we're talking about lifetimes where you've been in the same incarnation for 30,000 years, a million years. Imagine what you're learning, and imagine what happens when you touch in or tap into that part of yourself. What did that version of me know, and how can I bring it forward? And something I encourage a lot of my clients to do when we're doing past life work is, you don't have to know the name of all these incarnations of you, but you can give them a name. And then when you need to, you call upon that part of yourself. So right now, I'm obviously channeling a lot of Queen Atlanta. And so I'm going to start embodying her more when I need more compassion and patience. Okay, what would Queen Atlanta do in this long lineup? It's going to be okay. But like when you've met like yourself as a warrior or a gladiator or this wonderful light keeper, connect with them, find out what really made them that part, and then pull it into your life. If you've had a lifetime where, you were silenced, in particular as a woman, and a lot of times, for witchcraft, what part of you pissed people off so much that it made that happen? And where was that strength, right? And then how can you pull on that? And when you do that, when you combine these parts of yourself, I feel like there's so much peace in knowing how magical you are. And it's not just for a limited set of us, it's all of us. It's just that some of us have had a head start on recognizing the work, and we're more open to it because there's something about us, right? That's like, I've been a conspiracy theorist since I was 8 years old. So for me, I saw COVID coming well before it happened. And I told my family, listen, like in March of 2020, I said, this is what they're going to push on us. You have to understand it's an illusion. They're like, you're crazy, Priscilla. That's not true. But I could see it. And the thing that hurt the most is watching your loved ones fall for propaganda and not be able to do anything but hold space. And I had a lot of lessons in this last 3 years. And the biggest lesson is nobody's path is wrong. And you have to honor everybody's choices, even if they're the direct opposite of your choice. Understand that that human being on that soul level is doing exactly what they're supposed to do. And if they achieve their spiritual awakening in this lifetime, it'll be on their own time. It's not, you have to have it by 2021 or 2022 or has to be this year. So it's been a really amazing earth school, right?
Yes, for sure. A lot of my members are finding that as they're moving through their traumas of this life, primarily, some of them, past life stuff comes up and we work through that, but primarily this life trauma, that they're noticing friends and family fall away, and there's a grief that comes with that as they're moving on their path and they're watching other people not moving or doing different things.
Yes.
There needs to be a lot of compassion and love for self and the other person on these journeys, doesn't there? Because we don't know what's going on behind closed doors with anybody. So many people are suffering in so many ways from so many different avenues and traumas. So yeah, compassion for self and acknowledgement, like you said, that we're all on different paths at different timelines, different frequencies. We're all doing what our soul needs in this moment, and that's all we can do, is just be there when anybody needs some extra support.
Yeah. And I would say we probably all go through that. Everyone says like, oh, you're
Mm.
the black sheep of the family.
Mhm.
I used to try to drag my family with me, like, come on, you have to do what I'm doing. And it got really tiring. And my own mother was like, we don't want to go where you're going. And I was like, oh, so when
That's
that happened,
pretty clear.
yeah, we do grieve, but then just give them space. Like, we don't have to
Yeah.
have big arguments. Give them space, because eventually they might come back to you 2, 3, 4 years later, asking
Yeah.
you questions as they're going through a spiritual awakening. And we don't want to be arrogant or say, I'm not helping you now.
No.
The window has closed. It's like, everyone that's awake now, you're a teacher for all the other ones coming forward. So people are going to fall away, and some people will stay away, and perhaps those people weren't really good for your life, as well as COVID showed, right?
Mhm.
Then a lot of people will come back together, and then you'll have this incredible bond of going through these struggles, separately. And then what can you, like, bringing your combined wisdom is so wonderful. um I will say about trauma, and there is a ton of trauma on our planet, of course, in this lifetime. I just find that there are echoes from other lifetimes, and
Yeah.
very often you're going through the exact same thing. Sometimes the way I see it is the way that your soul died, or the way it led to its death, or sorry, not the soul, but the body in another incarnation. Your soul develops fears and shadows around it. So something I see quite often is, say, with people that are overweight and unhealthy, was in other lifetimes they starved, and they
Mm.
were
Famine.
so, yeah, yes. And so they have this need, they don't know when their next meal would be. That's what happened before. And somehow that instinct stays. And so it keeps building, or of course, things like sexual trauma, they keep rippling through. And so the opportunity, however, is as we gain our memory, we have the opportunity to heal it now. So we don't have to heal it again the next lifetime, the next lifetime. And that's incredible, because Earth has been caught in this incarnation karmic cycle for a very, very long time. And I truly believe that we're breaking it this time, which is incredible.
Yeah, it's amazing. I often get clients in for tapping, but sometimes we go to places like past lives because we often get stuck, and we might get stuck with a 3 or 4-year-old believing something. And I just say to them, I say, talk to your ego, and I want you to say, ego, did I bring this belief in with me? 9 times out of 10, there's a yes. And
Wow.
then I say, okay, ego, do we need to revisit that place? Do we need to go to that lifetime to look at this, to release it? And again, a lot of the time it will say yes. And then I just guide the client. And most of the times the memory surfaces for them, because in that moment they're ready. And I've just asked the right questions. And then that person brings the memory, or sometimes I do. So it comes either to me or to them, and then we're able to process it. We're able to acknowledge, heal, love that version of ourselves and change the picture, change the vision of that life. And then then we go back to the 4-year-old self, and they're like skipping around, happy as you like, because what they were carrying has been released.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up, because I think so many people have yet to experience different kind of energy healings. And again, I do see, I'd say within 10 years, I think there will be a mass exodus from the current medical model into sound healing, into tapping, into Reiki, into water healing, and
Functional
people,
medicine and
yeah,
nutrition. Yeah.
when people come back into that, they're going to feel so whole and so seen and so heard. And then you are going to heal those inner child wounds. And I do the same thing with my clients as I bring them to that spot where that little kid received that trauma. And then, towards the end of the session, they get to see what became of the adult, right? Like, because there's that inner child, but there's this beautiful connection. Like, you don't have to carry it anymore. Look who I am. Look how I've healed. And then it's the same, that little child is just free. Now they can go back to being innocent and seeing the fairies that they know they saw when they were like 4 or 5, right? Like that's why the type of work that we do, and for anyone out there that's doing the broader kind of light work, that's why it's so fulfilling, because
Yeah.
I would say my goal with a client is to leave them feeling lighter, with more breath and more clarity. And because our current world bombards us with so much distraction and media and chaos, most people don't understand that they don't even have clear thoughts. And when you even have 1 day or 2 day of just a clear mind, you can make really good decisions, and you can make really great actions upon them, right? That then shift your life. So, my first Reiki session that I ever received in 2013 absolutely changed my life. Who knew? But when you look back at your path, you will find these little points that
Yeah.
steered you in the right direction. And if you followed up with them, wow. If you denied them, you might still feel stuck. So I
Yeah.
guess to your listeners, I would say, if you've had a nudging to try somebody else and you're like, I don't know, always ask your soul, and then just try it. Try with an open
Yeah.
heart, and give yourself like a month to integrate. Just because you don't feel something, or something amazing didn't happen, doesn't mean that you didn't receive the frequency and that you won't make the changes. Like, patience upon the path. Humans will always want everything now. We want it like, well, I want to earn this certificate, and I have to get this, and I have to go here, and I have to do it all in this year. Do you though? Or is that ego? Right? Like, breathe. You're not going to miss anything. If you follow your soul's direction, you will be perfectly on time for whatever map has been laid out for you.
I dread to think how I would be if I hadn't followed the tapping path, for me, because I was pregnant on my second child, suffering severe undiagnosed PTSD, needed something to get me through the upcoming labor that I knew obviously I was going to have to do. Like, that was absolutely life-changing. I rang my husband from after the first session, and I was like, something happened in there that was huge. Like, it was like I knew within me I had jumped to another pathway.
Right.
It was a timeline jump for sure.
It's so amazing. And like, you had to trust your intuition to give it a try the first time. And
Yes.
the
But
first
I was
time
desperate. And sometimes when you're desperate, you'll try things, right?
I was desperate too. I thought my head was going to crack open. I was under so much stress that I
Wow.
had the thought that this is how people go crazy. I think I'm about to go crazy. Like, this is way too much. And
Oh God.
that breath and that light that came in that session, I didn't understand all of it, but I just had that same feeling with you. Like, I knew something had changed, and then I was just intrigued, and it just, everything started happening after that. But I did have to trust myself, and my sister had to give me a push and promise to babysit my children while I was taking this session.
Good. So she got the nudge from your higher self. She listened.
Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing.
She's done that for me my whole life. She's been like the door opener,
Oh,
and
wow.
I run with it. She doesn't do all of it, all the things, but she could. But she's like that. She's that space holder. She's like, here, come this way, Priscilla, and then lets me be.
That's so funny because my sister got me into tapping as well.
Yeah.
That is so funny. Yeah. Wow.
This is why we chose them, right? And then also, then I think when it comes full circle, you know, I had an envision that me and her would be like these healing sisters. We do all these amazing things across the globe, and that's just not the path she chose, and there's nothing wrong with it. Maybe her path, part of it was to help me understand my path, and that's.
And you don't need her, and also the power you have to stand on your own.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was going to say that we've talked quite a bit about trauma, so I think it would be good to kind of, because your mission is helping people recover from the trauma of Atlantis. So what exactly is that?
I'd say a lot of people, the trauma they feel is betrayal and shame. So priestesses in the various temples is how they were tricked, betrayed, literally stabbed in the back. How they don't feel safe to express their gifts again, because they were powerful and they were beautiful and they were so centered and grounded and kind, and they couldn't stop the corruption. And so many of us feel disempowered because we couldn't stop something, but it was never meant to be stopped. It was always a choice for you and your soul at every point. Do you choose lightness or dark? Do you choose the hard path, as Atlantis is following, of staying in your integrity and, you know, living the law of one? Or are you going to pick that very, what we call Hollywood life right now, the fame, the money, the gifts, you know? And a lot of people ended up choosing the darkness, and then they feel so much shame. But just remember, your soul wanted that, right? And you don't have to continue to carry it. Like a lot of my clients have said, like, well, I feel like I should have stopped it. You can't. You can't. And even, you know, Queen Atlanta, I had a conversation with her in Mexico, and she's like, Priscilla, she's like, we're not done on earth until every person is healed from the trauma of Atlantis. And I was like, dang, that's a tall order, Queen, but it's okay. So the way I do one-on-ones, of course, in Golden Atlantean healings, but this is also what I teach through my courses. As we go through guided meditations, we find out, like I mentioned before, those multidimensional aspects. And then you span out. We use Horus a lot, or Ra. You span out from a distance and you see, okay, what's the bigger picture? What was my mission here? My soul must have accomplished it for my life to have ended, right? And then now how can I apply it? And no matter where you are, anybody in your life, you have the power to reclaim it. And a big revelation I had a couple of weeks ago in reading someone's Akashic records was that a lot of the men in particular that were betrayed in Atlantis, and I mean basically overcome by darkness, they are the ones that are currently homeless, drug addicts, alcoholics on the planet. And when I saw that, and the way that the Akashic records showed it to me, my heart broke, because we have such condemnation of these people, a lot of us, right, on the planet, like, oh, they're just this, they're just that. But to actually know that their soul has been fractured for maybe 15,000 years, compassion once again, right? And just knowing that it's not going to be their fate to stay that way, that there's going to be more help and more light, and, you know, and things like in the tapping, in the sound energy, when these things become more widespread, people will be attracted to it, and they're going to find that little glimmer of light within themselves and take the next step and the next step and the next.
Amazing. Like, really often when I talk to men, it's like I could see their the wounded boy in the corner.
Yes.
You know, like I'm talking to them, but it's like the elephant in the room for me. I can really see the pain that they're carrying and holding, and I hadn't really connected it as far back as Atlantis, but perhaps the echoes are there, and that could be the root of it. It could be perpetuated through childhood, because, part of what I teach and believe is that through experience, we create beliefs. And so a negative experience, we will create a negative belief about ourselves and the world. And that doesn't just apply to this life. It applies to, say, for an Atlantis. And if we died in a state of shame and blame on self, then, I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, I'm bad. Are we carrying that through lifetimes? Are we then perpetuate? Is this pattern of karma that we're then stuck in, this cycle?
I believe that, that's what my clients have shown me through working with them. And I'd say with men, one of the biggest things is if they feel like they failed to protect, which is one of their biggest roles on the planet, is to protect their family, protect the women, right? If somehow, let's say they're corrupted in Atlantis, and basically they are, like the priestess says, spiritually raped, meaning that lower vibrational frequencies come into them and take over their will and take over their light. Imagine how that feels as a man to be this, incredible soldier of Atlantis and protector and very divine and masculine, and then to be taken over by darkness and have no say of it. And I say that a good analogy for my Star Trek fans would be like when the Borg come and assimilate you. There's a small voice that cries out that you can see it and you know what's happening, but you can't do anything about it. And I feel like this is what happened to the Atlanteans. And this is why so many men on the planet, again, it's almost like they've lost their role, because we don't really have the sacred masculine elevated the same way that we used to. And if you think about even just more modern times, modern quote in Greece, these men, again, they were our protectors and our warriors, and they had a deep, deep purpose. And now it's really shifted. And so men can feel really lost. And I say in my clientele, it's not geared for women. It can be anyone, but my clientele is about 90% women and 10% men. And sometimes I wonder, well, where are the men?
Yeah.
Or events or whatever. And I think as much as women have, been ostracized, and really there's been a war on women, there's been a huge war on men too. And so as the divine feminine rises, our goal is not to go higher than divine masculine. It's to hold space once again. That's what we do. We're the receivers, we're the chalices, right? We're the cup holders. So we create
the Holy Grail.
Yes, we create the container once again. And then when the masculine is ready, imagine how strong they're going to be when they're supported by women who know themselves and are ready to do that dance again, right? It's not about being independent. It's about these two wonderful beings creating wholeness. And that's part of what the agenda is to continue to divide us and to blur it and to make it very confusing. But in essence, when we're talking about polarity, it's feminine and masculine. And there's reasons why we have each of that within us. And there's reasons why Source has created that externally as well. So it can always be joined, right? Like we literally fit together. That's how we're made.
That is amazing. Like the vision there of the balance and the strength that each other gives each other, and the space to be who we are, the freedom. Like there's a lot of freedom there, isn't there? We're so constrained by the good girl and the good boy. Maybe we don't talk enough about the good boy conditioning as well. Like men are held back in so many ways. They do what they feel they should rather than what they want to do. Yes, there's a lot of unraveling to do. So, I mean, we could talk for another 2 hours on this. So let's try and wrap up. What do you recommend, right? So for people who feel lost in terms of purpose or feel stuck in their healing journey, and they've done loads of stuff on this life stuff, what do you recommend?
I say that number one, recognize that you're ancient. in that there's so much wisdom within you, and that your child, the child that you were, is probably your greatest teacher as to what you should be doing on the planet. So if you loved animals, if you love nature, if you always loved rocks, if you were fascinated by fairies, there's something there for you that will really help you. Then you have to trust it, right? Because we're trained not to trust our intuition, that, oh, a sixth sense, again, people in quotation, oh yeah, you have intuition. No, you literally do. So start trusting it. And then if you're going through, and you've looked at all the things in this lifetime and you still feel stuck, then it is time to examine, okay, what other parts of me have existed and what have they experienced? And then not to get caught up in the horror of it, because man, we have to die somehow. To leave an incarnation to complete it, you do have to die to get to the next one. So don't get caught up in this happened to me, and then this happened to me, and this happened to me. Yes, it did, but it happened for a purpose. And guess what? Your soul is alive and it's thriving. And it's all you have to do is tune into it. So, use your intuition. What books are you guided to? What teachers are you guided to? If there's a meditation, it's intriguing you, instead of saying, nah, I'm okay. Go into it with an open heart and see what happens. Experience sound healing. This is going to be very, very large coming forward. Experience vibration, understand that everything is vibration and frequency, and that we're truly one. And nobody talked too much about the law of one, but that's something that we need to understand, is that picture our whole entire existence as connected to source, and we're all just living out a different variation of what he, she wants to experience. And so when you know that you're one with your divine soul, you're one with every other being on this planet, including trees and crystals and bodies of water, then you start seeing things in a different way. And it's easier to heal because you can call on the support of the other trillions of souls around you, right? And then when you feel really strong, you can give that support. And that's why it's such a beautiful thing when we come into our spiritual awakening. But it always takes courage and curiosity, I think, because it's easy to be just to sit back with the ego and be like, I'm just going to turn on, Netflix instead. But choose to expand, and then you're going to see, I think, your life really go somewhere in a short period of time. In a year, in 3 years, you can grow in incredible ways. It's never too late, ever, to start your spiritual path. And it's never too late for you to start on your next journey, whether it means that you are going to switch careers, or, oh, I'm too old, or I've always wanted to write a book. Do it. Somebody needs to hear it. And my last thing maybe be like, sometimes I show up on social media and I don't want to be on social media in that moment. So I'm not as Queen Atlanta, maybe I'm just like very hard looking Priscilla that has had a hard week. And they're like, Priscilla, get on there. Somebody needs to hear what you're about to share. And at those times when I feel like my least self, that's when I get a lot of times the most response. Oh my gosh, that's exactly what I needed to know. That it's exactly how I'm feeling this week. And it's just the support. So also use your voice, get over the trauma that you've been strangled and hung a million times.
Yep.
Use your voice. You have insane wisdom within you, and somebody needs to know it besides you.
That's beautiful. Thank you. I'm just reminded that, there is billions of people that need help and healing out there. And there's millions, if not billions, of teachers, and there's never too many. And your story is really important because it's going to support 1, 2, 10, 1,000. It doesn't really matter. It's going to help somebody. And that's, I think, where the throat chakra is certainly shifting for good reason. This is now the time to share our voice, because we're not living in the age where we're going to get hung. We can share our voice. And so now is the time. So if we can move past these resistances that we feel that are old and restrictive, then there's amazing things that are awaiting us on this path.
Agreed. And it's exciting. As much as the world can feel heavy at times, also understand that it's the most exciting time, and your soul had to petition to be here, had to have like so much paperwork done to be here at this time. And you're not going to fail. You're going to do
No.
amazing if you trust yourself. You're going to be amazing wherever spirit is guiding you, and it's going to lead you to love, and it's going to feel so good.
I love it. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. That was amazing. I loved that. Can you do the blessing for us?
Always. The Atlantean blessing is very ancient, and it does mean that everything sacred is blessed and everything blessed is sacred. When I say it, just close your eyes, and if it triggers something for you, start investigating. Ra mati ma ra. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so, so much. You are the queen. Thank you, Queen Atlantis. Oh,